This album, I have to say, is probably is my favorite. There are pieces on the other two, the first two we put out, that I love, but this album, on a personal level, I'm the most pleased with.
We've been doing this a long time. Jill and I she's an artist in her own right. But for me, I love working with other artists because I think it helps the excitement of creativity. One will come up with an idea and then the other artist will go, oh, and it might spark something else. And then it just keeps growing. It keeps building on itself and becomes this really great big thing. That's what a collaboration is. I love doing that.
It's August 2025, and this is the Music is Our podcast, number 9. And this month, I sit down with Deborah Martin and Jill Haley and talk about their upcoming collaboration, a new album from them called Rendering Time. It's a follow-up to, a trilogy of releases from them. First, The Silence of Grace, followed by Into the Quiet, and then now Rendering Time, due from them in September. So I sat down with them and had a conversation about the time they spent in the studio as they created this music, and what it was like to blend their two unique styles and voices to create this sort of nature-inspired soundscape that's become a thread across the story of all three of these releases. Be sure to stick around until the end. After our conversation, I have the honor of premiering 3 new tracks from Rendering Time. It will be the first time anyone hears that music ahead of its September release date, so don't miss it. As always, please like and subscribe and find us anywhere you get your podcasts. Be sure that you sign up so you never miss a new episode. Visit us at spottedpeccary.com/podcasts to learn more. So Deborah Martin and Jill Haley, thank you for being with me this afternoon. I wanted to get the two of you together to talk a little bit about your new upcoming project and even your previous projects and whatever else happens to come up. So thank you for being here. So I will start simply by setting it up and saying that I believe that the two of you have been on plenty of other interviews, and for a lot of people have already heard maybe your backstories about how each of you are on individual musical journeys and how you came together and to collaborate, which in a lot of people's estimations might be a collaboration that seems coming from two very different directions, like maybe even two things that don't completely blend together the way people expect that they might, but they do. And so I thought it would be interesting for each of you to maybe talk about your backgrounds a little bit as individual artists and how you came together. And again, you've been on plenty of interviews before where people may have heard this from you, but I believe that every single point is a place to start again and discover your music. So maybe it's a great idea to just do that with me now again, if you can.
Sure. Okay, I will start. Always assuming that somebody listening may not know anything about us, so I'll just do a real quick intro. I'm classically trained oboist and pianist. Play a lot of English horn too, which is kind of like the big oboe. And I have done many recordings with folk artists and with a jazz trio over pretty much my whole life since I was in college. And then started doing some recordings in national parks of music that I wrote that was inspired by the parks. So I've done 12 of those. And while I was in the course of doing that, I ran into Deborah one year down in New Orleans at a record convention, ZMR, so Music Reporters. And we talked about possibly collaborating with my classical sounds with her more electronic sounds. At which point, John DiLiberto, who has a radio show called Echoes, and his colleague Jeff Town thought we were nuts. He said, "That's crazy. I can't wait to hear what you're going to come up with." So he has heard our first 2 recordings and has shared them, and we have just finished our third. So that's my backstory.
Great. Okay. Deborah?
Well, everything Jill said, we both have extensive backgrounds in different things of music. I am actually self-taught. I did study opera in my younger days, so I've done that. But I've done a lot of different things musically and stylistically, not just the ambient electronic. I've been in different rock and roll bands and toured and did a lot of live stuff, even country and western, which, again, that brings up John DiLiberto. He loved the country album. But I've been part of the Spotted Peccary label since about 1990. Even though I knew Spotted Peccary in the early 80s, I actually met them all and recorded some folk music at the original Spotted Peccary Brain Laughter studio in Tucson, Arizona. And that was a trip. So over the years, just developed that, and I ended up in Southern California where the label was, and have been with them ever since. And so I've done different styles of music. I do vocals, not just the instrumental music, but orchestral stuff. All of those things are dear to me. There's certain instruments that I love: the cello, the viola, the oboe and English horn. When I heard Jill play the first time I saw her at the ZMR Awards, I was literally in heaven. I went, that's what I want to do. I want to work with an artist who plays like that and see if we could combine stuff. And so I did. Yeah, I remember it at ZMR. I approached and asked Jill if she, would be interested. And we actually met again the following year at another ZMR award, where we finally said, yes, let's try it and see what we can come up with. And the rest is history. Jill came out and spent a couple weeks, and we recorded the first album, and it was wonderful. What did we do? We took turns. We spent a day out in nature, just hiking and looking at scenery in the Pacific Northwest for inspiring moments. Then we'd go back in the studio. Jill would spend time in there, on her own, just so that she could put down her ideas and stuff. And then I'd go in, and then we'd just do things together. But it was a really interesting process, I think, for two individuals who have different musical backgrounds of study and what we've done, to be able to it just worked. I don't know. It just worked, sure. I thought. And the combination of our sounds, and I had never heard things like that before so much. And I think that what we did was very new and refreshing in the ambient electronic realm, because it was also part orchestral. And we had a combination of beautiful acoustic recordings, live recordings, then adding additional acoustic instruments and percussion, and then marrying those together with some nice lush beds and washes of sounds, like a velvet blanket underneath all of it. So everything was kind of floating and weaving in and out of each other. And then, of course, the melodies came into play with that, and tried to leave a lot of room for the spatial parts of that. So what you didn't hear, you were actually hearing. It's what's the space between the spaces is what you actually hear. And the listeners got that immediately with The Silence of Grace. That was a beautiful thing. And then, of course, Daniel, with your stunning artwork, Jill and I both took lots of photographs for that first album, because we were out in nature and picked the best photos and sent them to you. And then he made it look like they were watercolor paintings. That was just an incredible way to do it. It really captured the artistic, the artistic integrity and value of not just the music, but the art itself. And it made it a much bigger statement, I think, from that perspective. So that was gorgeous. That was just lovely. So we really combined a lot of different techniques and abilities to make that album happen. So then, of course, the next album was easy, because we were like, we've done this, we can do another one. And and we did the same process, but it went a little quicker because we were already, I don't know, Jill, we were kind of then used to working with each other. And it just seemed like we had just worked on the other album a couple weeks before, and then we just dove back in. Same with this one. Although this one, the newest one, very different, I think, in
Yeah,
terms of
that leads me to a question that I did make a note to ask. I didn't want to forget to ask. Is that your previous collaborations were almost well, I mean, a lot of the reviews and people who've heard it, and it was sort of they were celebrated for being, pretty evocative and calming, and of course, centered around the idea of, nature, inspired by nature, of course, and kind of wondering if this new album that's upcoming has been a slightly different take for the two of you, and if you can maybe both say a few words about how this one might be different, both to you personally and maybe what listeners might hear relative to your previous two.
Well, this album, I have to say, is probably, and I is my favorite. I will say that. There are pieces on the other two, the first two we put out, that I love. But this album, on a personal level, I'm the most pleased with, because I did get much more involved in the mixing stage. The first one, I just came in and I said, okay, I'll throw a bunch of stuff down and I'll walk out of here, which was how I've worked with Will Ackerman and Imaginary Road Studios for many, many years. I would just throw a bunch of stuff there and they'd pick and choose and do what they wanted. But I decided after the second album that I wanted to be more involved in a musical sense and also a technical sense with some of the, at least rough mixes. I wasn't there at the end part, but that made me feel so much more satisfied. As far as the content and the actual musical style, I feel that the pieces and the titles, the music really reflects the titles. And I did a hard listen today again with earphones to really think about that. And it really hit me now. I hadn't listened to it for a while. And it hit me how each title matched up with the music. Soaring, I'm doing these big leaps on the oboe. Deborah's got all this sonic stuff going on. Some kind of you really feel like you're taking off. Sunlight and Starlight is another one that's just so beautiful, and there's two different ideas there, and I feel one is bright, G major and minor, for the sun, and then it kind of goes into a different chord for Starlight. So I felt that the pieces were really cohesive with the titles, and I got a thrill out of that, and I don't know. It just seemed like it's probably just a new maturity, just to the next level of working with somebody. The third recording, how they say the second one's kind of a sophomore thing. And then This one just seemed to, again, on my level, just go, wow, these pieces, I'm really proud of them. So not sure I answered the actual question, but I did meander somewhere, Daniel.
No, that's good. That's great. You did answer it in your way. And I didn't even have to ask you to mention specific tracks. I was going to later, but it's great because now I can play them.
Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, gee.
And show people, let them hear it for themselves. Deborah, do you want to say anything about this new record relative to the others? How is it different?
It is different in many aspects. I think the first album was very experiential in terms of what we were going to do with it. Because of our personalities and love of nature and exploration and discovery and being out in nature, that kind of lent itself to the compositional styles that we did in that first one. And Jill, I felt she didn't just drop a bunch of stuff and then leave. We really did discuss the tracks at that time, and we were very respectful of each other's space and what we were doing, and everything that Jill noted or mentioned. I tried to be very careful in that first album to make sure that I was hearing all of your comments, Jill, and including everything that you felt should be part of the song or how the editing was being done when you listened to some of the things about certain notes. And I did send her the things to listen to, and your comments were about, you were very specific, especially with the parts you're playing. And I don't blame you. I would have been exactly the same. If it didn't sound right, it wouldn't feel right. And if it didn't feel right, you wouldn't be happy about it. But the end result, I felt you were thrilled with, and I was too. And everything that got included was because of the both of us. It was I believe it was really a true collaboration. There was more technical work at my end probably, and I have to mention Matthew Stewart. He's a spotted peccary artist, phenomenal musician and composer and producer in his own right, and I've been friends with him for many, many years. And he came because he was thrilled to hear about what we were doing. And so he came and stayed after Jill had left. He came after I got done doing editing and stuff. And he spent a week, almost 2 weeks, because we were doing other stuff, and sat down, and he did the beautiful mixes in there. I was with him every step of the way, of course, and I did some of it, but it was really him making sure everything sounded good and it went together. So that was beautiful. And the same, as far as Into the Quiet, it seemed like a logical next step from the Silence of Grace, more of an introspective. The Silence of Grace was a beautiful outdoors and nature statement, and there was a lot of honoring in that. For me, it was a completion of honoring certain things, and the writings and the artwork and the booklet. Everything was was, for me, is still a beautiful, beautiful project. And then the Into the Quiet, it seemed like a natural progression from the Silence of Grace into the Quiet. It just had a nice flow to it. And so doing those compositions, I think the song titles were great. As a matter of fact, I had sent Jill a list of titles, and she came back and said something on a phone call, and you had this song that you kept going in your head, Violet Nights, and I thought she said Violent Nights, and I was like, what? How could that possibly be what we're Violent Nights? It was a very different, and I'm like, what? And then she laughed. She goes, no, Violet, the plant. And I went, oh, of course. Well, that makes total sense. And that's I love that track on that album. So, I mean, it was just beautiful. So this album that's coming, I don't know, can I say the name or should we wait? I don't,
Sure, you can. Yeah, you can reveal whatever you'd like. Yeah.
This one went really deep, this project. And we had come up with a name that Jill and I had discussed, and Jill liked the name and I liked the name. But then we discovered, I don't know, Jill, if it was you or me first that discovered it, or we both did. And it was like, there's a whole bunch of albums out there and other things.
You did.
Same name. I did? Yeah. I looked at it and I'm like, we're not doing that. We're not going to have the same name. It has to be something different. And so in the final mixing process, and in doing, and Matthew came out again and helped with that. I had already done most of it by then, and all of the edits and everything was ready, and I ran some mixes. And then Matt sat and listened, and he goes, I think we might want to try this, which we did. And he did some beautiful edits in a couple of the pieces, especially with the guitar parts that I did. And we're sitting there, and he's going to run a mix of it. And he turned off the in the actual audio program. There's stuff like Omnisphere and other things in my Roland Integra, and if you don't have them shut off, it will mix in real time. Which means if it's a 10-minute song, you have to sit for the 10 minutes while it's mixing it. And Matt, being the technical genius that he is, said, oh, we're going to turn these off because I just want it done so we can listen to it. So when you turn those things off, it'll make it happen in 10 or 15 seconds. for the song. But I don't ever do that because I'm more old fashioned in that way. I want it to be exact. And sometimes when you do it quick, you'll get digital glitches and stuff. And when you listen back and you go, what's that noise? That wasn't in there. And you have to redo it anyway. And you end up redoing and redoing. So I wanted it in real time. But he said, no, let's just get it done so we can hear it. So after he left and we listened to it, and I sent those mixes to Howard, and I sent them, I think, to you, Jill, to listen to. And Howard said, well, let me get back with you on that, Deborah. I need to listen to it. And then we did, and we worked out a couple of little things that needed to be adjusted. But when I finally did the final mix to send to him, I went to the control thing that you use. You select what you're going to do, and it says render. You're rendering it. You're rendering the tracks. And I'm like, well, and I'm just sitting here letting my brain float while the songs are playing. And I'm like, well, yeah, we got to render it in real time because I don't want any mistakes. And I go, I'm rendering time. So and I sent that to Jill, and she said, oh, that's cool. Yeah, let's go with that instead. And so that's how that came about. But the name render or rendering, it's a very, very, very ancient word. It goes back to biblical times, the Greeks, even pre-Greek. It meant to tear asunder, to rip apart and rebuild. And in the Bible, that's what it says, render asunder, and I'm thinking, oh my, we still have nature and God and religion, and all those things are all tied into this even without our even thinking about it, because music is everything, And so that's how that came about, a sense of time, and yet there is no time. And so rendering time, I took it to be more of a very universal infinity kind of a thing. What we're doing now is rendering time while we're sitting here talking to each other. The planet's rendering time as it does its rotation in a day. The solar system is rendering its time as it hurtles through the universe, and all the planets, everything is being rendered in its own time sphere. So we are rendering our own time here. And so that is such a huge picture and a huge concept. It's hard to even kind of grasp it. I remember Howard called me and he goes, Deborah, I have a question for you. And I said, sure, what is it, Howard? And he goes, this title, Rendering Time, why did you pick that name? What's up with this name? And so I gave him the whole thing, and he goes, Rendering Time, okay. But he was asking not for me to defend why we chose that. He was already thinking about concepts for what would represent it in the art world.
Sure.
And we had a great discussion about what would it look like. What would rendering time look like? And so then Daniel and I had some discussions, Jill, after that fact, and Howard presented some ideas. I had some ideas. Daniel, in his fantastic intuitive ability, immediately grasped that concept. And the artwork is stunning. And I know you haven't seen it yet, Jill. I'm going to send it to you. I will send you.
You haven't seen it, Jill.
She hasn't seen anything.
Oh, this podcast will be full of surprises.
Yes, this is a surprise one. And I didn't want, I know, but I didn't want to send it to you until everything was ready. It's already at the printers. We will have the product hopefully by August. Well, I should have it within the next week because I'm going to be traveling. So I'll send you some immediately, but I'm going to send you the artwork so you can see it. And it is actually a brilliant representation of rendering time. And the digital booklet I will send you, Daniel, I can't thank you enough. He such a wonderful ability he listens to the music before he does anything, and then having the concepts in place in the discussion about it. And I had to laugh, Jill, when you wrote in the comment, I'll let them handle that about the artwork and stuff. And they go, I went, oh, thanks, Jill. Okay, good.
But in many ways, the two of you already did handle it because you handed the music over to me, and that's I say this about every project that I work on with you all is that it's, the music is already telling the story. I just have to figure out how to pull it out and represent it visually. So it just extends the musical story that you all are telling. So it's pretty easy, really, when it comes down to it. I mean, for me, I'm minimizing it, but to me, I feel like the music is everything. So I just play it and let it fill the room and just try to respond to it. So I know, I think I know this already, but I figured I would ask the two of you for your thoughts on it. That for all of your collaborations so far, you didn't really take a traditional, well, these days, a semi-traditional approach, which many people use, is to trade files back and forth. You're not in the same physical space, so you just trade things. But I think that I have this right, that the two of you did share space when you created this music. And I'm wondering if you can talk for a minute about what sharing the space was like for you in the creative process. And you talked before about giving each other the space so that each of your voices came through in the music. And I'm wondering if you're sharing the space in your creative process while you were together played or was a factor in how you approached that part of the creative process. Were you in the room together? Were you together when each of you were playing your individual parts? Or, how did I think people might be interested to know how two people who get together in the studio actually make that work.
Okay. Well, we seem to be, I'm A and you're B, Deborah. So the first time I went there for the Silence of Grace, I did schedule to be there 2 weeks. I did not know Deborah. I did not know her husband, Chris. I stayed at their house and we got to know each other and also do some significant outdoor trekking around and seeing different places. It was partly just lovely for me to see places I hadn't seen before and also led to some inspiration. And that first time I was there, I did tell Deborah that I definitely needed time to be alone in her studio. Usually in the evening after dinner, I would go in there and just improvise some things on the keyboard, which is where I always start. I start with a harmonic and kind of a rhythm kind of feel for a piece. So, for example, I'm looking at the Silence of Grace, Verdant Sanctuary, that we were out in a beautiful green kind of forest, and it felt like a sanctuary. So then I'd come back that night after visiting that sanctuary and create some kind of music that I thought reflected that, which is pretty much how I do these kind of musical projects. The third album, I believe, Deborah, you'd sent me some titles before I came. Mm-hmm. And I decided, partly because of time, I was only going to be there for a week, to just take the titles and start coming up with ideas. So like I was talking about Soaring, about being just taking off into the sky. Another one that really hit me, of course, was, I don't know how to say it, Cenote. Cenote?
Cenote, yes.
Cenote, which is about water, deep water, and water. I have such an affinity for water. So I actually came up with some very loose harmonic patterns, maybe not that loose as far as harmony, but definitely not a significant form, just a pattern that I felt with a rhythm that reflected it. And I felt that Deborah really just captured beautifully what I played on those pieces, translating them in however she does it. But I can hear the spirit of there was a couple of them that really hit me today. The Place We Call Home. The Place We Call Home is one of my favorites. And to me, that was just supposed to be just kind of like, I came home, it feels good. And so I had kind of this cadence, harmonic cadence, which we call the Amen cadence. where it goes from the fourth chord to the first chord in the key. Amen. And that starts at the beginning of it. And today, when I listened to it back again, I went, wow, that really worked perfectly. So it's kind of this third album. I don't want to say it was more preparation because it still just evolved once I got there. But I had several ideas for maybe 5 or 6, 7 of the tunes. I remember coming with my little notebook and just playing them for you. And then you came up, Deborah, with a few things. So I think as far as the space, to get back to your original question, is we worked well together physically in the same room when I was, or maybe I was in the hallway and you were at the studio. That was our, but, we were pretty much in the same space for the bulk of the recording. Now, what Deborah did afterwards, of course, was I wasn't there, and she started doing her stuff. So, but it worked out well, I thought.
Personally, for me, I love working with other artists because it just, I think, enhances the whole thing. I think artists, we've been doing this a long time. Jill and she's an artist in her own right, and we can certainly create an album or a song or any kind of musical endeavor on our own. But for me, I love working with other artists because I think it helps the excitement of creativity, because one will come up with an idea and then the other artist will go, oh, and it might spark something else. And then it just keeps growing. It keeps building on itself and becomes this really great big thing that you don't know you could have done. It's just, that's what a collaboration is. I love doing that. And there was no issue. The recording space, it's a small room, but it has plenty of room for the keyboards and the recording equipment and microphones and a place to sit and play and record. So there was no problem with space in there for both of us to be. But for the technicality of recording, Jill, yes, you did sit kind of in the hallway. There's a high ceiling in the recording room, and there's drums and all kinds of stuff hanging all over the walls, and all the instruments are in there. But for the recording part, when Jill was ready to play her parts of what she wanted to play against, depending on what song we were in, we had the basic structure of the songs laid out already. And so I would sit at the computer and the recording console and have headset for Jill, and I would have to literally turn off the monitors, because the first time we tried it on the first album, we double recorded because it was playing through the speakers and the headphones. And I'm listening back to it going, what is that echo? What is happening here? And then I realized what had happened. But to get the best sound, there's really good acoustics in that room. I don't know why it is, but that room just is a beautiful flat sound. But because she was playing a wind instrument, I wanted to make sure that we could get the most of the air quality and the tonal enhancements of the instruments that she was playing, because they're beautiful, the oboe, English horn, and anything else. Yeah. But so I had her sitting in a chair at the studio door. So half of her body was out in the hallway, which has an even little bit higher ceiling. And then the sound, the microphone was right at the doorway, and I had it set at a level about maybe a foot away, I think, Jill, from your actual instrument, so that if you were playing with all of your wind strength, it wouldn't be a blaring sound all of a sudden, note by note, because there were some very delicate passages that you played that were a soft breath. And they just beautiful. But then you would get louder on the more energetic piece in that same track. So I had to really figure out where would be the best place to put the microphone while she was playing. And so, yes, she was kind of sitting there, and we would just do it one thing at a time. The beauty for me of working with someone who really knows their stuff, and Jill, you know your stuff. You're a trained artist. You've been doing it for years. You understand the nuances of playing a note, the value of each note, and all of those things, and the notes themselves. She can tell if she's sharp or flat. It doesn't have to wait till 6 months or whenever I'm editing going, oh man, that's really bad. No, she would even stop me sometimes. Stop, Deborah, that's flat. I got to do it again. And we did that. And that made the time go very nicely because we did have a limited amount of time since she had traveled out here to the West Coast, since she lives on the East Coast. I like the idea of working together in the studio simply because I think that for me, I think some of the energy gets lost in translation when you're just shipping files back and forth. It thins it out for me. I like recording in the moment because I think then you're capturing the essence of the feeling in that exact moment. And for an example, that song From Source on this new recording, I wanted to go back to the beginning of the universe. Not the Big Bang, but when creation starts and there's sounds, we wouldn't know what they are. When a cell explodes or divides, what kind, do they make noise? That would be a great science project. But for the beginning of humankind or the beginning of us, what kind of sounds did they make? They didn't have a language yet, right? So I wanted Jill and I both to make the sounds. I could have done it, but it was much more fun with both of us making these primordial vocalizations into that microphone, and doing it together multiplied that effect. That's what was so cool. There were just, I could do a track, and I actually did do one track by myself because I was giving an example. Here's what we need to do. And Jill's looking at me like I'm nuts. She's like, I've never done that. Well, now you're a vocalist, Jill. Here, we're going to do it. And we did. And having her play some of the percussion instruments. She's also a percussionist. And that was really something, because just stepping out of whatever zone you're used to being in takes you that much further. And I feel that this project, as deep as we got to go in a short period of time, it just really, I think, really propelled our growth even further as artists, individually and collaboratively, I think. This one really took me to places that I had not yet been in terms of working with someone and in terms of putting together all of the elements necessary to make this a good audio presentation, but also the theme of it, the stories. So From Source, I mean, Fitful Dreams was a wild song. Yeah. I remember I played it. Jill was you were doing something or other, and it was right before you got here and you were on your way. And I was saying, we got to have another song for this album. We need something that's just going to explode. So I just started putting patterns together and all these sounds. And then I said, well, what can I call this? And I did that right before Jill showed up, and I called it Fitful Dreams because that's what it felt like. It felt like a dream and a nightmare all combined into one. And then I played it, and Jill goes, remember what you said after I played it? You said, Deborah, I don't need to put anything else on this piece.
Yeah.
It is done. And I said, no. I remembered, I said, no, Jill, this is a collaboration. So we're going to add one more track. Please go over to the keyboard. And we found a sound that we've used before. And I said, listen to it and add something. So she did. I didn't want it to be just something I had done. It had to be both of us. And you did. You added a really cool little part in there that's in there. And so I'm
it's a very cool piece, and it's so different than every other piece on there. And it does capture so much angst. You just feel this like tension and when
you're dreaming, if you're asleep.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to hear you both talk about those moments that happen, because those results, for whatever they are, whether they were expected or unexpected, they never would have happened if you were trading files across,
right?
Sending lead transfers to each other or files through Dropbox. You would have never been you wouldn't have been in the space and had the opportunity for those things to happen. Yeah, I think it's kind of unique in that way. Like your process is unique in that way.
It is. It's more creative. For me, because I've done plenty of file drops over the years for other people.
Sure.
It seems so sterile, and sometimes I never even know what happened. They used it, they didn't use it. But this is much, much nicer. Yeah.
Yeah.
More personal. There's an energy that it's very personal, and the spontaneous moments that we had all throughout, just grabbing in here, play this shaker, let's do this, it becomes very exciting because you're in the moment of that moment, and you can't recreate all of that. So for me, it's much more personal, and I get very excited about that potential that happens. And that would not happen sending files back and forth. I prefer doing everything live because there's just a different sound to me doing that. Like Jill just said, it's not sterile. We really have live sounds that are very meaningful. The authenticity of it for me is fantastic. I love it. So.
Well, I'm going to ask one other question that, and this is because I know Deborah, and I would have to imagine that even though I know Jill is a multi-instrumentalist and can play many instruments, my guess is that Deborah asked you, Jill, to step out of your comfort zone and maybe do things that you hadn't done before, maybe play instruments that you've never touched before. Did that happen? And can you say a little bit about what that felt like?
Well, I did. I have to say, deer hooves had not been in my list of accomplishments before I met Deborah. We did that, I think, on the first recording, Silence of Grace.
Here, take these.
Yeah, rattle them. So. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely all three recordings. There were different things. This latest one, I have a nice flute, but unfortunately, it was in the shop, and it was one of those "it'll be ready next week" kind of back and forths for a few months. So it wasn't ready when I went to Deborah's, but she had a beautiful wooden flute. There was wood, right? Yeah, and
black cedar.
Okay, wax. So I played that a lot, I think. I heard several things on there. So that was new. But yeah, definitely the primordial screaming, that was not in my comfort zone at all. I have to sing because I'm a teacher and I'm a music choir director. So singing's I'm fine with, but just howling like a wolf, that was not comfortable for me. But when I listened back to it almost a year later, because it's about a year now, Deborah, I think I was out there I know I was out there last summer.
Yeah, August.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. Now that I listen back in the context of the piece, it makes so much sense. But at that moment, I was like, okay, I'll go with this, but I don't know where this lady's coming from.
You have to trust the process.
Yeah.
You have to trust it. Yeah.
And you have to trust the person you're working with. You do.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Jill. I trusted you completely. I knew you would do it. And I was like, oh yeah, you can do this. This is what ambient music has, many, many things in it. And what was really interesting too was the fact that the black cedar flute that she played, especially on The Shadow of the Moon. I love that song. It's just a haunting song.
I know. Yeah.
It's haunting. And it really, the music does do that. But there was a sound that I played from the Roland V synth that sounds exactly almost like the black cedar flute. And so in that song, when Jill heard it back, she goes, "Is that the flute?" And I said, "No, that's the melody part that I put in there, and then you played the flute to it, and here's your flute part." You can't tell them apart. It's seamless. For me, it's mystical and magical, which captures the shadow of the moon. You don't know. But if you played them side by side, you would not really be able to tell based on just the tonality of it. So there's a little part where that's playing. It was almost like a call and response thing, because there's this little thing, and then all of a sudden the flute comes in, and then the other thing comes back, and at one point they're both playing at the same time, and it sounds like a duet. But it all sounds exactly like that cedar flute, which was just really fantastic. So those kinds of things, that was magical. I thought it was I'm like, oh my goodness, it sounds so similar. So very nice.
Do you think that the two of you rub off on one another? Like, do you think that your styles are very different? Jill, do you feel like working with Deborah has changed the way you think about other music you listen to, or maybe music that you're creating? Has it changed your approach at all?
I don't. It's changed my listening. Some of that music didn't seem to make as much sense before I started working with Deborah, and I'd get impatient and just like say, I don't want to listen. I heard Voices of the Rim today on Sirius, by the way, and now I listen to that. And when I first heard that kind of music, I was like, just a different. I just have to think. I just think it's more of a. I've now become more open to listening to that music and feeling it. Because to me, music's very visceral. It's a feeling thing, and when I listen to music now, that kind of music, I not everything. I don't like everything, but a lot of it, I feel there's a little bit more of a heightened awareness. As far as my own writing and stuff, I'm not really finding. I'm doing a little bit more just with some synthesizer patches, but I don't think it's nearly what you bring to the music. It's two different voices, but they're coming together. The two voices are coming together, and that's what matters. Yeah.
I think that's great, Jill, because just experimenting with it. And one very special moment for me, and this is truly special for me, when Jill first came out here when we were working on the first album, she had no idea who I was or what I would do, and I just knew that you could play oboe and English horn and piano beautifully, and you had all this beautiful training, and you had done choir directing, still do, and I had done that also. So we had some similar backgrounds in terms of teaching music and doing different things. And so she came in, and I remember you brought a song idea and you played it for me on the keyboard, the Yamaha, and I said, okay, well, let's record that. And so we recorded that song, and then listening to it, I said, well, Jill, I'm not sure how to ask this, but could you just play the left-hand part by itself and let me record it? And then just play the right hand by itself and let me record it. And you said, sure, yeah, you could do it. And you said, oh, okay. So you were on the headset, I think, and the whole part was playing, so you could follow the same timing and tempo was matching. And she did. I recorded them separately, the left hand on one track, the right hand on the other. And then I said, watch this, Jill. And I'll never forget the look on your face. I went into the left-hand part and the right-hand part, and instead of a beautiful, like a grand piano sound, I picked some different sounds.
Yeah.
Kogarashi was one of them, the Kogarashi Maru anyway. But and I played them back with those two sounds, with both of those hands playing, and she just sat back in this look, and she went, was that my parts?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. She goes, oh my. And it was like a night flower that just bursts open. That moment for me was very, very special, because I felt in that moment that I had been able to share a part of what I do directly with Jill. And she got it. And just that one link, that tether that connected us was so special, because then I knew she inherently already understood what it was that I was doing. And then I remember you asked, you got some more sounds we could try? And so, and we did. We spent the time listening to different sounds, and you did help pick some of the sounds that I ended up working with. You said, oh, I like that. Oh, no, that one sounds terrible. And we went through, but it was that one moment that opened that gateway of understanding of what it's like taking an idea and a concept and making it at its full potential, the most that it could possibly become in that moment. And so for me, that was just huge. That was a very special moment. And I think that Jill and I are connected in that way, and we always will be because of that. And that's why we were able to just jump right back in. And I know you had commented each time, well, I don't know what sound you're going to pick, but I know what you pick is going to work, and blah, blah. It was just a wonderful, those kind of moments, it's hard to describe sometimes. It really is. But for me, that was so special because we became so connected. When her face opened and it just, the enlightenment moment, it was great. It was fantastic. So,
yeah, you were sort of, it was a true collaborative moment. It's like the musicianship was coming from Jill, but the, sound design was coming from Deborah, and, those two things come together.
I am never cease to be amazed when that creativity happens. When the final song is done, I just sit back and go, wow, we did that? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And now wherever it goes, whoever hears this music, just like we've gotten some beautiful, beautiful comments from listeners from the silence of grace into the quiet about how it changes them in some form. It's a transformative moment because they're listening to it and they become the song in that time. And it's going to be the same with this, even more so. I think this is a very deep album. And it just takes on a life of its own. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's really, I think the point of this music, right, is to transform people, or to transport them, to another place. So Rendering Time is the new album, and it's going to be out September 26th. We talked a little bit about your other releases and what those sounded like. Can you both maybe just call out one or two things that you are hoping that listeners of Rendering Time might hear? Is there any aspect of the projects that you hope people will be listening for?
I think I talked already about Soaring, and I talked about this place called Home, because those two hit me very strongly. And I think I had come up with the keyboard parts, and I just felt that the spirit carried through. But the other ones that, like, we didn't talk about The Secret of Talking Trees yet. That one, there's this beautiful hollow, it just sounds like, I keep thinking of bamboo sticks or hollow tree trunks being hit together, but they kind of resonate, kind of like a marimba a little bit. And whatever sound you picked, Deborah, for that, it's like the trees are talking. That one really hit me. And The Shadow of the Moon, you already talked about. That one, the guitar that you added, I don't think you did guitar on the other two albums, right? I don't think. And this one, the guitar that you added was so beautiful. It was just so effective on that one, and a couple other ones too. But that's the one I remember. Just seeing if there's anything else. We talked about a lot of these already. Yeah. Oh, Spaces Within Spaces. That also had that hollow, pipey kind of keyboard sound that I liked. And I just felt in the mix, there was a lot of space, whether that's how you used different effects, I would guess, some reverb and stuff, and just the spacing and maybe even the digital sounds. But there was space, and you felt like you could hear the space in the spaces. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. But some of them just seem to be more like natural, like Soaring and the sunlight and the starlight. Those ones are like the ones I immediately intuitively are drawn toward, because they sound like I can hear just so many elements of music that I'm used to. Harmony, a specific melody, a specific rhythm. But then with Fitful Dreams, it's kind of a cool contrast, and the secret of talking trees. So yeah, I think people are going to find out lots of different things in this one, Daniel. Lots of different, and obviously, like every album, different songs are going to hit different people different ways.
Yeah. I think that's what we hope for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Daniel, I wonder if it would be okay, because Jill, maybe you can make a comment to each one of these. I wrote a little thing. I tried to make it a very small little statement because we did it in the silence of grace and we did it into the quiet as well.
Mm-hmm.
Each song to come up with just one thing. And I thought, would it be okay if I mention those so that we go through all the songs on the album, so that because people are going to be listening to this, it might give them a real focus on what that song is, and then whatever meaning they get out of it. Is that all right? I just thought I'd start with the title cut, Rendering Time. And I just wrote, and Jill, please, if you have a comment, I'll pause before I do the next one, because you might have something to add to it. For Rendering Time, whether real or imaginary, time is its own trajectory, and we are but a placeholder. Space within spaces, which is the one that she was talking about just now, I wrote, locations attained when seeking a journey beyond the quiet.
That ties into the whole trilogy there, doesn't it? Into the quiet. Yeah.
If you're a space within the space, it's the quiet part of you that gets revealed. And then cenote means place of deep water. And I wrote, and this was based on discussions that I had with Jill about this, a place of ceremony, healing in the coolness of water, floating timelessly. Because it was a reverent space. When she played some things on that, we talked about the reverence of it.
And spiritual, very spiritual. I felt at the beginning it was, again, I had that churchy kind of sound to it, just a cathedral. That was really cool. Yeah.
Yep. And then from Source, this is the one where we did those wonderful primordial screams and guttural sounds. Beginning of all that is, no time in time, cyclical passages, and growth eternal. So it's all from Source. We are who we are. We're based on everything that's developed over the centuries of time and millennia and all that. So, and then fitful dreams, not awake, yet not asleep, traveling the ethers of time in a mist, like you said, like a dream space kind of, And then shadow of the moon, we celebrate its phases and are in awe of the pull, the mystery of it. And then this place we call home, our inner self, our home, our town, our city, our planet, our universe, our all. Because home means many things to many people. So right now we're at home while we're doing this, but our home is also within ourselves. And then the home is also, our planet is our home. Our city is our home. So it has it's, for me, it's got a very huge meaning, but yet a very small meaning. So you zoom in and zoom out. It's one of those things. And then soaring, seeking and attaining the unreachable without fear of the accomplishment. I think some people might be afraid of succeeding because then they don't know what they'll do after they succeed. And so there's a fear there. But this one, you just let go. Like you said, Jill, the music just takes you, you're just out there. So, and then secrets of the talking trees, enveloped by whispers and sighs of the gentle giants that tower above.
Nice.
Sunlight and Starlight, closing the album out with a beautiful, hopeful piece. Cycles of day and evening, life in its continual pattern. So all of
And also has a bit of feeling of raindrops, the way you took the keyboard part. So when you were just talking about day and night, I'm also thinking about seasons.
Yes.
No? Yeah, very cool.
Absolutely.
I love that piece. That's such a cool piece.
I love how it culminates the entire album. It's the hopefulness, it has the shadow and light, and it's just the continual pattern of life. It's rendering, basically. We're rendering. So I think that really does envelop the entire project. I love that as the closing song, Sunlight and Starlight. Yeah. So anyway, I hope everyone will get some meaning out of those words and understand the concept
beautiful
is behind what we were doing when we were working on this project together.
Well, thanks for writing them, and thanks for sharing them. I think people are going to have a lot to listen for, and that's a great way to sort of set it up so that people can then go deeply listen and see what they find. Well, I think that is a good place to leave it, and then this way I can leave a little bit of time to actually preview maybe one or two of the tracks. It's ironic, I think, that the album itself is about time and about rendering time. And one of the things that I often say to people who are willing to share this virtual space with me and talk about their art, it's that your time is the most valuable resource you have. So I really appreciate you spending a little bit of it with me this evening. So Deborah and Jill, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you for this.
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I feel very grateful that we could do this. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being willing to share this with everyone, and I can't wait for them to hear it. So
great.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.